You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Deku Joins Pokemonverse. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Visitor from a different world. Today of all days, izukumidoriya was feeling a plethora of different emotions all at once: excitement, joy, stress, fear, anxiety. Now you may be wondering why he is feeling this way. Well, today is the day that he and the rest of his class are able to use their quirks in an all-out mock villain versus mock hero exercise, so he was excited. He also got paired up with a very pretty girl called Ochako Uraraka, so he was happy. It was also the first time he would be using his quirk, which he knew from the get-go was extremely unstable and possibly damaging or fatal to his body, so he was stressed. He and Uraraka paired up against two people with extremely powerful and versatile quirks that each had much skill in using, so he was anxious. However, one of those opponents just so happened to be his ex-childhood friend and bully, bakugou Katsuki, and judging by the look on his face, he was out for blood, so yeah, he was shitting his pants. Izuku tried to cool his nerves as he and Uraraka crept around the building where the fake weapon was being guarded. He even attempted to make a plan with Uraraka to secure victory. Ultimately, it came down to Izuku distracting Bakugou, knowing he would come after him, while Uraraka snuck around and tried to secure the weapon from Ida. And things happened just as planned. Bakugou charged in headfirst through the whole building while hunting for Izuku like a savage. Izuku faced Katsuki head-on while Uraraka made her way up the building. The two teens were in a standoff with Izuku visibly injured from several of Katsuki's explosions. They were about to attack one another when something strange stopped them in their tracks. An unusual portal appeared out from the ceiling, and its presence alone was enough to stop the superpowered teens from their scuffle. The portal generated a strange aura while emitting an otherworldly sound. It was a luminescent gray with a white spider web-like design that appeared to never-ending suck itself in. After staring at the strange portal for a solid minute, it began to fluctuate, and screams could be heard coming from within it. Several seconds passed as the screaming only got louder, and a shape could be seen forming closer to the opening of the portal. Another moment passed, and a screaming object hurled through the portal and crashed among the rubble around the building. Stones flung all over the place, and a huge dust cloud exploded far enough to make the two teens cover their eyes. Meanwhile, the portal behind them immediately closed after spitting out its passenger. After a few moments, the dust to see what had burst through into their mock exams. A small groan is heard from the dust and rubble. "Ow, my head," came a voice clearly in pain. Another second later, and a silhouette broke the dust cloud and unearthed stones around itself. After a few minutes of watching the silhouette stubble and pick itself up from the ground, it finally came into the open to reveal a person, a regular human person. "What hit me?" the person asked while holding their head. The person rubbed their head and back while saying, "That's the last time I let Hao convince me to have a Malicet eating contest with Nebi." Once the person walked closer to the stunned teens, they could now make their description. It was a tall, slender, yet medium-built guy with tan skin. He looked a bit older than Izuku and Katsuki, with medium-length yet thick purple hair on top, black hair coming at his back and sides, yellow eyes, and a weird fashion sense. He wore a white and purple headband with black trim and an odd symbol that looked like two half-circle lines covering a circle. The headband also separated his purple and black hair, making it look like a weird hat. He wore a white muscle shirt and an open purple hoodie with odd red eye marks on the hood. Black and purple shorts with white and purple shoes. Around his waist was a belt made of a conglomerate of different sized bags, some of which had evil little faces with the mouth being the zipper. After shaking himself off from the dust and getting back his calibrations, the older teen finally noticed the other younger teens standing in front of him in stunned silence. He looked around at his surroundings and back at the teens a few times to ensure he didn't imagine this. After a minute, he side-mouthed to the air and said, "I don't think we're in Alola anymore, Nebi." After a moment of no response, the teen looked to his side and said, "Nebi." That's when a look of panic exploded across his face, and he began to shout into the open, "Nebi, Nebi, where are you?" As the teen shouted around for this Nebi person, the other two teens finally came out of their shock and started to put together what happened. So did their personalities. Bakugou was the first to snap out of his trance and shouted, "Hey, Purple fucker. The teen turned to bakugou, looked around, and pointed to himself with a confused face. Yes, you, I'm talking to you. Who the hell else is wearing purple? Don't look down on me. Izuku did want to point out that the size difference between the two was exceedingly significant. In fact, the older teen towered over bakugou by at least 5 inches but decided to keep quiet, knowing full well what he'd do. The guy put his hands up defensively and exclaimed, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's just calm down for a second there." He took a deep breath and stated, "Okay, look, I don't know who you guys are or where I even am right now, but I can speak for both parties when I say that we are all clearly freaked out over what just happened. So why don't we just take a deep breath, calm down, and try to figure this out without going crazy?" I second that thought. Izuku finally became vocal. "Kaken, we don't know what's going on right now or who this guy is, but let's be reasonable. End the fight here and try to figure this out. He's at least trying to be civ. Are you saying I'm not civilized?" Bakugou snapped at Izuku while letting out small explosions. Izuku freaked out while backing away and exclaimed nervously, "And no. You just always rush into things and don't. Shut the hell up, shitty nerd." He snapped at Izuku again. Meanwhile, the older teen was back far away from the two teens, nearly in a corner, in a weird defensive and shocked animated stance, with an expression like he just said some form of high sacrilege. The other two teens noticed this and turned their attention to him. He stood there for a good minute before finally speaking in a fearful tone. "You have moves, like a Pokemon. That's impossible, you're human. Unless," he trailed off with a horrified expression, "did Team Plasma, Team Rocket, and the Ether Foundation join forces to make a human Pokemon hybrid? What is this world coming to? Does their insanity know no bounds?" He began to rant. Izuku was more than confused at this point about whatever he was talking about. Who were Team Rock, Plasma, and the Ether Foundation? What's a Pokemon? Who's Nebi? What moves is he talking about? Bakugou, however, was not at all confused or asking any similar questions. Instead, he was even more pissed off after getting more crazy info and being ignored. A vein bulges in his head as his anger rises to new levels. First, his fight with Deku was interrupted by this purple dude who comes out of a magic wormhole. He's thrown entirely off his mojo, and now Purple Fucker and stupid Deku are trying to stop the fight. His fight and Purple Fucker was only spewing out more noise while calling him a poke whatever. Screw this. I wanted to blast shit up, so I'm gonna do it. Bakugou thought to himself while using his explosions to rocket towards him. F this, I'll blast you to hell first and ask questions later. He yelled with a vicious look in his eyes. Kaken, stop. Izuku cried as he tried to halt Bakugou. Mercy, the teen cried while covering his body in defense. Bakugou was only a few feet away from the older teen and ready to blow him up with a powerful blast. His smile curved into a wicked grin, his body flared with excitement, and his arms trembled with the rush of power rising to his fingertips. Just before he could ignite his quirk to the older teen's face, a small round object bounced from his belt and in front of the attack. Bakugou flinched for a moment at seeing the circular object until it exploded in a flash of bright blue light. Bakugou winced at the blinding burning sensation in his eyes and then felt something collide with his body with such great force that it flung him clear across the room and crashed into the far opposite wall. Izuku also winced from the bright light, heard, and saw Bakugou's body fly across the room and slams into a wall. When his eyes readjusted, he saw the most amazingly terrifying thing he'd ever seen. The older teen waited for his face to get caved in by Bakugou. But when nothing happened but the sound of something slamming into a wall with great force, he dared to look out from his arm shield. He saw that the flying teen was gone, and a set of red scales wrapped around his body. He heard a triumphant roar and followed the sound up to a creature that he smiled with relief and joy. Gyarados. He squealed with joy at the massive creature. Gyarados. Is that what he called this thing? Izuku squeaked with fear in his head. The creature standing in front of them and at the defense of the older teen was nothing he'd seen before. Well, he had once, back when he was younger, his mother would tell him scary stories about powerful serpentine-like dragons with untold power, and this thing matched their descriptions perfectly. It was like something that came straight out of science fiction. It is a huge serpentine-like monster with armored red scales and a yellow underbelly, angry red eyes, a huge mouth filled with fangs, 2 long whiskers, and ear fins with a 3-pointed crest on its head. It also had 3 pointed fins on its back, 2 near where its head met its neck, and the last near the end of its long body with a tail fin like a fish. Izuku couldn't tell if its crest made it look mad or it was just always looking mad, but this Gyarados thing sure did not look pleased. And seeing it made Izuku keep his eyes trained on it, frozen in place as he swallowed dryly. The older teen was not scared of the giant dragonfish. Instead, he looked overjoyed. "Boy, am I glad to see you, buddy," he exclaimed excitedly to the animal. Gyarados leaned down, letting out a low yet friendly-sounding grumble, and brought its face close to the older teen who petted it under its chin. "You saved me in the nick of time, again," the older teen stated, embarrassed. Gyarados made a sound in its throat that could have been equal to laughter as if teasing him. At this time, Bakugou pulled himself from the wall and fell to the floor with a grunt. He picked himself up on shaky legs and heavy breath and stared down the older teen, only to be thrown off guard by the giant red sea serpent cooler around him. "The fuck is that?" he shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. All heads turned to Bakugou as Gyarados turned back to the teen and defensively coiled around the older teen as it let out a mighty and bone-chilling roar in warning. Bakugou let out a small growl and stared down at the giant animal, only making it even angrier. Izuku knew there was no seeking reason with Bakugou at this point. He knew he'd try to attack despite the danger involved, so he opted to hide behind a pillar and wait things out or intervene if things got too out of hand. The older teen, looking much more confident, stated to Bakugou, "Listen here, you hybrid or whatever you are. I don't know who or what you are, but you had better stop attacking if you know what's good for you. You can't win." Bakugou snarled at this declaration and set off more explosions in his hands. "Shut the hell up. Don't you fucking tell me what to do, you purple fuck. I'll kill that shitty fish and then you." Bakugou shouted at him. Gyarados roared again as the older teen replied calmly, "Then you leave me no choice." He took out a small round device from his belt and pointed it at Bakugou. It was spherical and colored half red and half white, and it had a black line going around it, separating the colors with a white button in the center. "I'll just have to battle and then catch you to quell that vicious temper of yours," he stated boldly. "Don't you make fun of me." Bakugou roared as he shot towards the teen. The older teen struck a confident pose with his hand shot out in the front and exclaimed to his beast, "You ready, Gyarados?" Gyarados roared in acknowledgement. "Great, then let's size him up with a dragon pulse," he shouted. Gyarados then closed its mouth, and when it opened back up, it shot out a multicolored beam that took a dragon-like shape that soared towards Bakugou. Bakugou used his explosions to curve around the beam and continued closing the distance between them. "You're fast, but I have the type advantage. Gyarados, use Hydro Pump," he commanded the fish dragon. Gyarados then shot out a powerful stream of water from its mouth like a cannon. The blast was much wider and faster than Dragon Pulse, and Bakugou had to halt his attack and dodge the blast by blasting himself in the opposite direction. "Let's see how you fare with a rapid-fire attack." Gyarados keeps using Hydro Pump, he shouted towards the animal. Gyarados obeyed and continued shooting multitudes of hydro pumps at Bakugou. Bakugou could just barely keep out of range and outpace each attack, each of which packed tremendous speed and power behind them. So much so that the ground broke apart, cut pillars in half, and gaping holes made all over, reducing concrete to mud and stones. Izuku was stunned by this sight. Not only was this thing unnatural, but it also had multiple quirks, first an energy attack and now a water attack. What was this thing? He was also having a hard time keeping out of the firing line or just finding decent cover. Every time he would hide, a blast of water or some other attack would destroy his defense, and he would have to flee for his life to not get ripped apart. Eventually, Gyarados got tired from spitting up water and had to take a breather. Bakugou saw his chance and rocketed towards the monster in mere seconds. He then let out a few powerful explosions right into the fish's face. Gyarados roared in pain from the attack and inches back from the blast. "Gyarados, are you okay?" the older teen called the fish. Gyarados shook itself off and roared again. The older teen smiled and said, "Good to hear." When Bakugou set off his last explosions on Gyarados' face, he used the momentum to push himself into the air. He then propelled himself down with another, ready to pepper the giant fish again. "Here he comes." The older teen called attention to Bakugou. "Use thunder." Gyarados' head crest began to produce electricity and shot a bolt into the air. It curved back down and right into Bakugou's flight path. Bakugou got lucky and managed to use another explosion to propel himself back. The attack missed and made the ground underneath explode. "Hyper Beam," cried the older teen as Gyarados shot out a yellowish-white beam of energy from its mouth. This time the attack hit Bakugou and sent him flying back. After the beam dissipated, he skidded across the floor and quickly brought himself back to his feet with a feral snarl. Gyarados hissed back and kept its defensive stance around its master. "Geez, this thing is tough. How much HP does it have?" the older teen asked himself. Bakugou then raised one of his gauntlets and pointed it at the teen and his pet. "What's it doing?" the teen asked himself. Bakugou snickered and stated, "This time, I'll blow both of you to hell." Oh no. The teen pales in fear. Now die. Bakugou yells as he pulls the pin and shoots off a deadly explosion. The older teen screamed in fear seeing as there was nowhere to escape from the blast. But Gyarados had another idea and quickly wrapped its long body around its master to shield him from the attack. The explosion quickly engulfed Gyarados' body in a plum of fire and debris within a blink. The dust cleared, and Gyarados' charred red body emerged from the smoke. The giant fish unraveled from around its master and flopped on the ground with a defeated groan. The older teen opened his eyes and saw that he was completely fine, along with the downed Gyarados. He freaked out, running to the fish's head and holding it. He begged, "No, no, no. Come on, buddy, you have to get up. Please. That Pokemon is still on the loose and wah." Bakugou emerged from the smoke and collapsing building with a snide smile on his face as he stared down the older teen with one visible yes and caused him to scream with terror. This sight made Bakugou lick his lips in anticipation as he slowly walked up to the teen and his downed animal. "Arceus, Arceus, Arceus." The teen cursed as he began to shuffle wildly through his belt pouches. Bakugou then went into a full sprint, ready to blast and the teen began to panic while failing to back away due to Gyarados' body trapping him in. He looked back at the fallen form of his pet, then back to Bakugou, who was still charging him with only a few feet to close the gap. He jumped in front of the fish face with arms wide open to shield the fish from the explosion, closed his eyes, and braced himself. "Die!" Bakugou shouted as he jumped into the air with a large explosion. However, instead of being hit with an explosion straight to the face, Bakugou was the one hit with a fin tail straight to the side of his body that sent him flying into the nearest wall. The teen opened his eyes and saw Bakugou jammed into the wall with a glare on his face, Gyarados' tail laying out in front of him, and Gyarados starting to pick himself back up. Gyarados lifted its body and let out a triumphant war cry. The older teen's eyes glittered with hope and joy at seeing the giant fish while exclaiming, "Gyarados, you're okay. I knew you could tough it out. You're not one of my best for nothing." Gyarados lowers its head to its master, allowing the older teen to pet the fish under its chin and behind its finned ears with a growling purr. Meanwhile, Bakugou had pulled himself away from the wall and looked even more pissed off than before. He lost off a few explosions and an angry scream showing that he hadn't given up yet. The older teen and Gyarados look back towards the angry fuming younger teen and tense up, seeing as he was still not down. Even after all that, it's still kicking. "What level is this thing anyway?" the older teen complained. The two people and giant animals stare down at each other for several tense seconds as the older teen whispers to his pet, "Gyarados, I have an idea, but I need you to trust me." Gyarados seemed to understand its master and appeared to nod its head. The teen smiled and pointed his arm at Bakugou. He commanded, "Then get ready to battle." Gyarados roared with gusto. Bakugou charged at the teen and his pet as the older teen commanded the fish to tank the attack. Gyarados obeyed and stood perfectly still, allowing Bakugou to charge forward and land a few powerful attacks on the fish's face. Thick black smoke covered the giant animal's face as a painful screech can be heard from inside the cloud. Bakugou smiled at hearing the roar, knowing he had done a significant amount of damage to the creature. The older teen grinned, seeing Bakugou's ego flare up, just like he planned. He took advantage and shot his arm out towards him and commanded, "Now Gyarados, use Hydro Pump one last time." Suddenly a large stream of water bursts out from the clouds and nails Bakugou head on. Bakugou was thrown back a good several feet before he was able to push himself out of the torrent power and landed on his feet soaking wet. Bakugou growled at this, and putting up his other gauntlet, he aimed to fire it one last time at the creature. But the older team expected this and waited until Bakugou pulled the pin. "Quickly, Gyarados, get rid of that explosion with Hyper Beam." The older team commanded the dragonfish. Gyarados then let out the pale yellowish energy beam and shot it into the center of the explosion. The two forces collide with such great force that they cancelled each other out in a blast of smoke. Bakugou covered his eyes and tried to gain better footing from the force of the explosions exerting from both sides. But he was quickly outmaneuvered when Gyarados burst through the smoke with an angry expression and pounced on Bakugou. Gyarados quickly wrapped its body around Bakugou like a snake and held him in a restraining squeeze. Bakugou tried to break free but to no avail as he simply flopped his head around like a fish out of water. So instead, he changed to swearing and threats. "Let me the hell go, you ugly seafood platter. I'll turn you into sashimi and blast that purple fucker into next week." He cursed them both. The older teen smiled and said, then let's finish this. Gyarados, finish it off with thunder. Gyarados' head crest generated electricity and shot a bolt in the air, which rolled down where Bakugou was held in its coils. Bakugou looked up with a stunned expression and marveled at the lighting and fear. The attack shot down and landed directly on Bakugou, whose screams were drowned out by the intense power. After the attack, Gyarados lets go of Bakugou, letting his body slump into the ground, and moved away as the older teen threw the round half-colored device at Bakugou. The device flew through the air and bounced right off Bakugou's head. It then popped open, and a red beam enveloped the younger teen's body. It seemed to be similar to electricity since it began to shock and cause Bakugou to convulse even further. The device fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The older teen looked at this in confusion and said, "What? It didn't work. But he's a Pokemon, he should have gone into the Pokeball. Unless he's part human, he can't be caught." He then looked out into the distance like his brain was buffering until he snapped back, exclaiming while throwing his arms in front. Then how the hell was Ether, Rocket, and Plasma going to control that thing if they couldn't catch it? Then the older teen's eyes caught someone hiding behind one of the few remaining pillars was a set of fearful green eyes. The teen turned towards the eyes as Gyarados stood ready, half more relaxed around its master. But the older teen put a hand up, signaling the fish to stand down, and it did. Seeing that he wasn't going to attack, Izuku poked his head out a little more. The older teen took up an awkward and coy demeanor while looking to the ground in a sweat drop. Seeing this, Izuku decided to come out from his hiding spot but still kept his eyes on the giant red dragonfish. The older teen rubbed his head while laughing nervously and apologized. "Haha. Sorry you had to see me get like that. I get pretty intense when I battle, especially with new or hard ones. Hope I didn't scare you too much." Izuku also gave a nervous laugh and replied, "Haha. Yeah, I guess we should talk now, to clear the air on things." The older teen asked, "Why yeah, talk. That's what I wanted to do." Izuku trailed off, not knowing the teen's name. The older teen blushed in embarrassment and quickly introduced himself, Garfield. "But everyone always calls me Gar, or Gar, or Jenger. You can call me whatever. Izukumidoriya. Nice meeting you." Izuku introduced himself back with a slight bow. An awkward silence filled the area as the two teens couldn't think of how to carry on their conversation from here. "So nice giant, fish, dragon, thing." Izuku tried to break the ice. The older teen pepped up a bit and replied, "Oh, thanks. He's a Gyarados, and one of my oldest companions. He's helped me through a lot of battles. I owe much of my success to him," he said while petting Gyarados' scales. The teen then turned to Bakugou's still body and motioned to him. He asked, "Suuo, what's up with this Pokemon? Where'd he come from?" Izuku looked at him weirdly as he replied, "Kakin isn't a Pokemon." "And what's a Pokemon?" The older teen looked back at him weirdly and stated, "You're kidding, right? You have to be kidding. This," he exclaimed while waving at Bakugou, "can't be anything but a Pokemon." He was flying around it and shooting fire from his hands. And he took a direct blast from Hyper Beam. And I've been hit by Hyper Beam, and let me tell ya, it's not fun. Also, how could you ask what's a Pokemon when there's one, literally, right next to me? Izuku blinked at the teen and replied, "That's Kakin's quirk. He can produce explosions from his hands, and also, he's definitely human." "What's a quirk?" Gar asked back. "I think we should start explaining some things to one another," Izuku offered. "Yeah, I think so too," Gar agreed with a sigh. A few hours later, in a meeting hall, Gar now sat around a table, surrounded by several heroes, all of which were asking and answering each other's questions about what in the world is going on. The mock exercise was cancelled, and all students were sent back to their homeroom until things sorted out, apart from Bakugou, who was sent to Recovery Girl for his extreme injuries. After some time of debate and questions, the group finally settled down and tried to compile everything they learned about each other in the simplest form. "So let me try and see if I understand this clearly. There are no Pokemon in this world, and all Pokemon are called animals, and they don't have any moves. But instead the humans are the Pokemon and have moves you call quirks and work as superheroes like in comic books." "That is crazy," Gar exclaimed while sitting back in his seat with a flop. "Yes, and let me see if I understand this clearly. In your world, your animals are called Pokemon. These Pokemon have quirks, and all of them have multiple or interchangeable quirks, but people don't. And you use Pokemon for fighting while keeping them in these Pokeball things. That's even crazier," Aizawa explained back nonchalantly. Gar immediately sat up straight and exclaimed, "You're telling me I've been to some strange alternate dimensions before, but this place beats 'em all. So you've done this sort of thing before? Midnight asked. Gar nodded and replied, oh yeah, loads of times. But like I said, I've never seen a place like this. Something ... must have happened during the trip. He theories while tapping his chin. How exactly did you get here? You say you're quirkless, yet you're able to travel between dimensions. Present Mike asked. Well, technically, I'm not the one who does the traveling, Nebby does. Gar confirmed. Who's Nebby? All Might inquired. He's a legendary ultra beast that can evolve. He was kept hostage by a crazed woman who was obsessed with gaining knowledge of other ultra beasts. I went to another dimension with the crazed woman's daughter after Nebby evolved, and fought her as she merged with another ultra beast and beat her in a battle in the ultra beast's home dimension. Gar explained to the heroes. All the heroes sitting around the table stare and blink multiple times at the young man with confused expressions, trying to make sense of what he just said as if he had just grown a third head. Realizing his explanation, he blushed, embarrassed, and rubbed his head. He said, I realize now that there is a lot to unpack in that. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say he's a really powerful Pokemon that travels between dimensions. Wow. Present Mike whistles. Wow indeed. Gar confirmed. So did you come here on purpose when you and Nebby were traveling? Midnight asked. Gar took a sharp breath and, putting up both hands under his chin, he explained, well actually that's a story all on its own. You see, I was in Galar. After I had held my title as champion for the umpteenth time, I set out to do other things, fill the pokedex, complete my curry dex, catch every Pokemon in Galar, EV and IV breeding, and get all forms and flavors of alchemy. But then I got bored again and decided to go traveling to visit some old friends. First, I traveled to Alola and met my old friend How Where. Gar was then cut off by Aizawa, who butted in, saying, could you just skip to the part where you got to our world? Gar's sweat dropped in embarrassment. Oh right, sorry. Anyway, How said that he could out-eat any man or Pokemon in a Malasada eating contest. And he was right. So he decided to test his skills against something that wasn't a man or Pokemon and wanted to compete against Nebby, who is, but actually isn't a Pokemon. It's kind of weird. Anyway, I don't know how he convinced me, but I agreed, and then the two started to eat while I was sitting on Nebby's back to keep him calm in case things went south. And well, things did go south, and real quick too. I shouldn't have let Nebby eat bitter Malasada cause then he started to go wild from the taste. He started to randomly open ultra wormhole portals all over the place and jumped into one, going at speeds I've never seen him go before. He booted me off, and I got sucked outside the ultra stream and into a weird wormhole I've never seen before. And now I'm here, he explained casually. All the heroes were silent as they digested this information and tried to make some sense of it, as most of it was a lot of things they never heard of before. That and the fact it sounded so absurd. Suddenly the door opened, and a new voice chimed into the silence, saying, well, that does sound like quite the adventure and conundrum you got yourself into, young man. All heads swiveled to the door and saw the hyper-intelligent animal thing, Principal Nezu, standing in the doorway, finally coming to the meeting after having to take care of some other urgent business. Nezu straightened his tie and introduced himself, saying, hello there, I am. Before he could continue, Gar shot up from his seat and whipped out a Pokeball and screamed while pointing to Nezu, a Pokemon. Gar threw the device at the small animal, and the same thing that happened with Bakugou happened with Nezu. The device opened, and a red beam enveloped him, which caused an electric shock to run over his body and convulse from it. When it failed to catch the principal, the device fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Gar stared blankly at this before realizing what happened and theorized, oh, I guess you're not a Pokemon, huh? Nezu stood up while brushing himself off, and in the nicest, most patient tone he could manage, he confirmed, no, I'm not. Gar rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed, and apologized, saying, sorry about that. I'm a trainer, so when I see a new Pokemon, I kinda freak out and try to catch it. But I mean, you do look like a weird shiny Rattata ... I in a tux. After fixing his tie again, Nezu then replied, well, not all of us are okay with being beaten to near exhaustion, forcefully placed in a small prison, and then forced to fight other creatures to the death for the entertainment of others. And let's not forget the Stockholm Syndrome. Everyone in the room made a shocked expression as the principal roasted the young man until the young man walked up to Nezu with a ticked-off expression and pinched his nose hard. Ouchie, Nezu complained. Gar then took a deep breath to calm himself and ranted off on the animal, saying, okay, I'm not even sure where I should begin with you. First, you have to weaken a Pokemon to catch it. It's the only way. I tried to catch a Pidgey without weakening it first, and I still regret it. Second, a Pokeball is not a prison. It's a holding device. The Pokemon's matter is converted into energy. They're more like in a comfortable sleep-like state. Third, Pokemon battles are an international sport that has strict rules, guidelines, and regulations. Fourth, Pokemon don't fight to the death, and they only fight until they pass out. And speaking of which, that's quite hypocritical coming from someone who delights in setting up events where young children fight in a ring with deadly abilities, pinning them against one another, fighting them yourselves, and sending them off to fight other stronger adults. And fifth, there is no Stockholm Syndrome. That's just a myth. When a Pokemon is caught, they immediately become tame enough to receive commands, and they still have free will to do what they want, when they want. And I can't tell you how many times I literally asked a Pokemon to just join me on my journey. Everyone in the room was now making shocked expressions at the sweating principal who just got roasted back with cold hard facts for an adolescent. Deku cleared his throat and replied calmly, I see your point. A cold and awkward silence filled the room at this point until Aizawa, who was the only one to care less about the current atmosphere, struck back up the conversation, asking Gar, so, time to ask the big question. Are you able to get back to your home dimension? Gar slumped back into his seat, and with a solemn headshake and anxious expression, he replied, I'm afraid not. Only Nebby or Lunala can travel in between dimensions. He then took off 6 different-looking Pokeballs from around his belt and placed them on the table, saying, and the Pokemon I have with me can't do any of that, so I guess I'm stuck. This time Midnight broke the atmosphere, placing a reassuring hand on Gar's shoulder and asking, is there really no way for you to contact your friends or Nebby to come pick you up? Gar looked off to the side and replied, there is one way, but it's not working. He then slumped down even further into his seat, and giving off an exhausted sigh, he continued, I could pull Nebby or Lunala from my PC, but my Pokebox is not working. Gar then pulled out a large unusual-looking device from one of his pouches. It looked like a thick frisbee made of glass with a handle on top and a small metallic screen on the front with several buttons. He pressed one of the buttons and the whole thing extended upward until it was at least 2 feet tall. It had glass all around and 3 separate gray dividers with small indents around each one where a Pokeball is placed. It had an invisible sliding door mechanism that opened automatically. Gar sighed and said, deep ocean floors, dark caves, thick jungles, endless deserts, or the highest mountain peaks, this thing will work without fail. But I guess alternate dimensions are its limit. Another round of silence was set into the melancholy atmosphere until Present Mike asked out of the blue, wait, so you keep your pocket monsters in a PC? Yes, Gar answered. Like a computer? He asked again. Yes, Gar replied while sweat dropping a bit. A PC computer? He asked further. Yes, Gar stated firmly with an aggravated sigh, having to say the same thing over and over. That doesn't make any sense, he exclaimed in confusion. Gar rolled his eyes and explained, the Pokeballs convert matter into energy. Who's to say that matter can't also be converted to data? And besides, there are like 1,000 different Pokemon. You really think I'm gonna carry around like 1,000 different Pokeballs all the time? No one said anything but opted to just stare at the young man. Seeing this, Gar sighed and continued on. The limit that anyone can carry is about 6, otherwise, they're sent to their personal PC. And the 6 that I currently have, Gar motioned to the 6 different Pokeballs on the table, can't perform interdimensional travel, so I'm pretty much stuck, like a shelter on a slowpoke tail. Gar slumped into his seat again until Nezu spoke up, causing the young man to straighten out at his voice. Well, seeing as all things have come to light, it would be in everyone's best interest if you were to stay here at UA until you're able to travel back to your world, he told the teen. What? Everyone in the room asked the principal with mixed confusion and surprise. Well, it would be quite heartless of us to throw you out into a world you simply have no knowledge of, and it would go against everything we at UA stand for. Nezu explained further. So you're gonna let me stay so you can keep an eye on me to make sure I don't decide to use my murderous magic beasts to slay all of you and conquer your world? Gar asked while making funny hand gestures and faces. In a manner of speaking, yes, Nezu replied nonchalantly. Fair enough. Gar shrugged his shoulders in agreement. After that was settled, Gar deviated from the topic and stated, speaking of which, sorry about nearly obliterating one of your students. The one with the bad temper and fire hands. Nezu waved his apology off and replied, it's quite alright, mistakes happen. And you were simply defending yourself when young Katsukui attacked you unprovoked. After he heals up, we'll be sure to have a strict talk about unprofessional hero behavior. The other teachers also nodded, knowing that bakugou would be handled accordingly. Gar then deviated from the topic again and asked, speaking of healing, What have you guys got in the line of a poke center? Poke center, All Might asked. Gar sighed and replied in a sweat drop, I think we still have some things to discuss. The next day, everyone in Class 1A was abuzz with excitement as they all crowded around the otherworldly person who joined their class. It was decided that Gar would join the hero course of 1A in order to better hide his other dimensional origin and Pokemon from the rest of the school, and the watchful eye of the media because the whole class witnessed Bakugou's fight against Gar and Gyarados. So the day following the botched mock hero villain exam, Gar arrived at 1A in an official UA uniform with Aizawa, albeit with his purple and black headband. After Aizawa explained Gar's placement, he had to step out for a bit to take care of some last-minute things. Right after he left, the whole class sprung up from their seats and surrounded the older teen, asking him all kinds of questions or just marveling at him. Things like who he was, where he came from, what his world was like, what Pokemon are and how powerful they are, what he does, what's his favorite color, and so on and so forth. Eventually, Ida had to forcefully separate the class from the overwhelmed teen and regain some form of structure in the class before another Pokemon burst out and decided to attack them. Most of the class listened, but a few still pressed on despite the logical demand, until Gar broke them away, lying, saying he could already feel Gyarados' Pokeball start to shake. And seeing what the fish monster did yesterday, the rest of them didn't want to be caught up in what happened to Bakugou. After everyone spread out a bit, allowing Gar some much-needed breathing room, Ida fixed his glasses and instructed the class. Now I know all of you are just as excited as I am about Gar-kun's placement, but let's try to have some semblance of order so as not to overwhelm him. He's in a completely new world with rules and laws he doesn't know, so let's try to help him acclimate while he's here. Sorry, Ida-kun, it's just so exciting. You know, Uraraka apologized while rubbing the back of her head. It's not every lifetime when you get to meet a real-life alien. Kaminari exclaimed with sparkles in his eyes. I'm human, Gar commented. You know what I mean. Kaminari shot back, making Gar frown. Yeah, I mean, you were all like wah, and wham, and boom, and your giant fish was like roar, and lasers, and water cannons, and thunder, and wow. Mina described what happened like an excited child. Gar rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed, and replied, thanks, but his name is Gyarados, and I really didn't do that much. I just told him what to do, but I don't think someone else was very impressed about it. Gar motioned towards Bakugou sitting in the background. Bakugou, for the most part, was healed up with a few patches and gauze wrappings on his body and face. He was still in his seat, slumped into it and looking away from everyone else with an angry scowl. Oh, come on, man, no need to sulk. Accidents happen. Kirishima tried to cheer him up. Accidents? You weren't the one blasted by a laser, doused in high-pressure water, constricted, and then blasted with lightning. Bakugou snapped back while exploding in his seat. You did attack him unprovoked. It was self-defense on his part. Gyro stated matter-of-factly. No, he's right. I did go a bit overboard. But that's mostly because I thought he was a weird Pokemon. Gar waved off Gyro while walking towards Bakugou and extending his hand. Since we'll be seeing each other more often now, let's put this behind us and start fresh. Gar offered with a smile. Bakugou looked down at his hand, grabbed it, and in an instant flung the older teen over his shoulder and hard on the ground. Gar gasped for air as pain shot up his back and head. The class gasped, and Ida ran forward to restrain Bakugou while Izuku and Uraraka ran to Gar to help him back up. Bakugou-san, please, I understand you're upset after getting beaten, but that's no excuse to attack him out of petty anger, especially after he tried to make peace with you, and right after our teachers gave you a meeting about appropriate hero behavior. For shame. Ida told him off. Bakugou struggled against the taller teen's stronger grip and cursed him out, shouting, fuck off 4 eyes. The purple fucker had it coming. And I'm not a fucking Pokemon. Could have fooled me. Gar squeaked out in pain while trying to sit up. Knowing the moral code of Team Rocket, Plasma, and the Ether Foundation, I wouldn't be surprised that they did make you. I heard you mention something about that yesterday. Who are they? Izuku asked Gar while helping him into a chair. Team Rocket, Team Plasma, and the Ether Foundation. They're groups of evil organizations or teams that have done pretty rotten things to Pokemon in the past. But I managed to put an end to them all. Gar explained. What things did they do to Pokemon that was so bad? Uraraka asked. Gar blew out air like it was a heavy topic and replied, boy, where do I begin? Team Rocket is a team of thieves who believe that Pokemon are meant to serve their organization, making money off of rare Pokemon and their parts, even stealing things used to evolve, capture, and heal Pokemon. They were even stealing endangered Pokemon themselves from the wild and trainers alike. They even went so far as to clone a Pokemon. Gar told the class. Clone, one person exclaimed in shock. A Pokemon, another person questions. Gar nodded his head and explained, yep, the original was a Pokemon called Mew. Team Rocket found its DNA in the jungles and then hired some twisted scientists to make an even more powerful clone. After many failed experiments, Mewtwo was born. And they made it powerful, too powerful. They tried to restrain it by warping its memories, but that only made things worse. It became savage and cruel, then broke out of its prison and killed its creators. Holy shit, one person exclaimed. That's terrible, a girl shouted. Gar quickly retaliated by saying, but it's fine now. I dethroned the leader of Team Rocket and caught Mewtwo, making him much more calm and tame. After everyone calmed down from the shocking info, Zero asked, so what about this Team Plasma? Gar snapped his fingers and explained, oh them. You know, out of all the teams I met, they're the ones who I thought were simultaneously the most logical and second craziest. Second, someone asked. Gar waved off the comment while saying, a story for another time. Anyway, Team Plasma was hell-bent on liberating Pokemon from humankind, seeing humans as harmful to the existence of Pokemon. In a way, they had a point but went about it in the worst way possible. So they tried to use the power of 3 legendary Pokemon in order to subjugate the whole region in a tyrannical monarchy rule. If that wasn't bad enough, they did something similar to what Team Rocket did to Mewtwo. One person gasped at this and asked anxiously, they cloned a Pokemon too. Gar's sweat dropped as everyone inches closer to his face, and he answered, no, they augmented a Pokemon. Augment? Like giving a new part to the original. Someone asked. Gar took a deep breath and replied, let me explain. They revived a fossil of an ancient Pokemon and then augmented it with technology, completely morphing its body, physiology, typing, basically everything about it, essentially turning it into a different species altogether. They even grafted a cannon to its biology. Sounds like RoboCop, Kaminari commented. But I managed to stop them like I did Team Rocket. Gar followed up. Uraraka visibly quivered and stated, geez, I don't think I even want to know about Etha at this point. Gar glanced over to the side as he said, well ... they're even worse. How? Everyone shouted as they got into his face in suspense. They did everything that Team Rocket and Plasma did, and more. Gar answered as calmly as he could, warranting Ida to hold everyone back again. After things settled down again, Gar explained further. The Etha Foundation was a huge pseudo-island paradise that acted as a reserve and research center for injured or endangered Pokemon. Though it held many dark secrets behind it, its CEO was completely obsessed with finding these super rare and powerful Pokemon called Ultra Beasts. Its head scientist successfully created 3 Pokemon with something called the arceus system, allowing it to become any type and most suited to fight against Ultra Beasts. But they were too powerful and had to be restrained. Did they clone or augment the Pokemon? Someone asked carefully. Gar shook his head and replied, worse, they made a Pokemon. Everyone gasped as Gar explained further. From what I read about them, they're a conglomerate of different Pokemon parts put together. They didn't just take an original and upgrade it, they made something completely different. A Frankenstein's monster among Pokemon. A hushed gasp fell over the whole class upon hearing this. Oh my god, could they be any worse? Momo gasped in horror. Gar then put his hands under his chin while sucking in a sharp breath of air. Gyro saw this and asked in exasperation, please tell me you're joking. Gar gave a quick sigh before explaining. The CEO of the Etha Foundation was actually a wolf in sheep's clothing, appearing nice, helpful, caring, and sweet, but in reality was a cold, warped, cruel person. She even went so far as to abuse her own kids and treat them as toys. She also used the Pokemon she rescued to make the arceus Pokemon, and the ones she felt were the cutest or prettiest, she would lock away in frozen, suspended animation, even having a trophy room for her to admire. That's sick, someone exclaimed with a nauseous tone. But you stopped them, right? Another asked anxiously. Gar nodded and replied, I did. But the more I learned about why the CEO did what she did, the more I actually started to pity her. What? The whole class shouted at him. How could you say that? From what you told us, this woman is vile to the core and evil in all manner of ways. So how could you pity her? Mina shouted at the older teen while grabbing his shoulders. She lost her mind and her loved one. This statement made everyone go silent as they back away from him, and Gar continued explaining. Lucamine and her husband Moan discovered the Ultra Wormholes, Ultra Beasts, and Ultra Dimensions. It was their combined efforts that allowed them to make these discoveries. They even managed to get their hands on a very docile Ultra Beast called Cosmog. But something went wrong. I don't know all the details, but something happened, and an Ultra Wormhole sucked up Moan. who disappeared forever. Lucamine lost her mind due to stress and to the desire to make something to combat the Ultra Beasts if they did invade. Her heart might have been in the right place, but her head has long since lost. And I barely managed to help her daughter scrape up what remained of their relationship to build back together. No one said a word, only silence lingered in the air at his statement. It was hard to hear but reasonable to accept. Losing your loved one plus extreme desire turning into obsession would lead most people to become completely mad. Wow, that's really sad. One person said softly, yes, but that still doesn't excuse the things she did. Another added, but enough about that, let's talk about me. Buzzed, a new voice shouted as a floating orange smartphone with a face shot out from behind Gar's back. Talking phone. Hiroshima screamed in fear until his fear vanished as he realized what he said and rebuttal excitedly, saying, no, wait. Cool. Talking phone. Gar, who or what is this? Uraraka pointed to the self-flying phone. Oh, this is Gar began to speak until he cut off. Hello everyone, my name is Rotom. I am Garfield's personal assistant and his most handsome, most intelligent, most amazing friend. Buzzed, the phone, Rotom, introduced himself in a self-absorbed flamboyant manner while spinning around in the air. Rotom appeared to be a phone with its face on the back. It was colored orange with two small lightning bolts sticking out on the top and bottom. It glowed an outline of blue with a toothy smile and unusual-looking white eye rings with blue centers. And most obnoxiously egotistical, Gyro said to herself, is that a Pokemon? One person asked. Gar nodded and replied, yep, Rotom is a Pokemon. Come on out of my phone for a minute. Suddenly an orange bolt of lightning shot out of the phone, and the device fell out of the air and into Gar's hand. The phone now looked like a regular black smartphone. The lighting manifested into an unusual light bulb-looking creature with the same coloration, hue, eyes, and smile of the phone, though this time it had two blue lighting bolt-sharp appendages sprouting from either side. It also appeared to buzz and fizz around, almost glitching, like it couldn't sit still. Whoa, one person exclaimed, so cool. Another commented, so cute. Another added with a coo, it looks like electricity. Another observed. Izuku moved towards Rotom, with huge exciting sparkly eyes, and stated, you're so cool, Rotom. Rotom smiled back while making many electrical noises. Izuku was taken aback by this and asked Gar, why isn't he talking? He can't talk unless he's in my phone. You see, Rotom is a ghost electric type, which means he can possess electrical devices. Even his typing, moves, and stats change depending on what he possesses. He explained, he doesn't look like a ghost. One person observed. Gar shrugged while looking to the side and replied, well, Pokemon typings can be a bit blurred at times. There's a bird Pokemon that's also a dragon type, and it's just like ... Why? So, is he part of your team? One person asked. Gar shook his head and replied, nope, Rotom serves a completely different function. I got him as a gift from a close friend. Gar held up his phone and said, come on back in, buddy. Rotom smiled and, in an instant, shot himself back into the phone like a bolt of lightning. Rotom's face appeared back on the phone while also taking back its coloration, and sighed with relief, saying, it's much more comfortable inside your phone. Buzzed, Rotom here is actually a special case in terms of his kind. He doesn't just possess technology, he upgrades it too. Gar explained excitedly. Like how? Someone asked. Gar tapped his chin while thinking and answered, well, I'm glad you asked. Buzzed, Rotom cut it off, getting in front of his face. I'm a phone with unlimited texting and talking, Wi-Fi and hotspot capabilities, a built-in firewall, internet surfing, DirecTV to video streaming functions, a built-in camera, GPS, hacking, decoding algorithm, facial and fingerprint recognition. I double as a pokedex and can check moves, typing, stats, and record data on Pokemon. Buzzed, I have everything. Buzzed, he listed off his achievements in a face-rubbing manner. Gar nodded and added, yeah, Rotom has been a real big help and saving grace in my most recent journey. Tamanari then scooted up to Gar and excitedly asked, hey, can you show that giant dragonfish thing on Rotom? The one that wiped the floor with bakugou. Gar sighed at his phrasing and corrected him, saying, again, he's called a Gyarados and sure. Gar turned to Rotom and asked, Rotom, pull up info on Gyarados. Rotom then faced the class with his screen, and an app titled Pokedex opened. A moment later, a picture of Gyarados showed up as Rotom read its entry aloud. Gyarados, the atrocious Pokemon. Dex number 130, a water and flying type, and the evolved form of Magikarp. When Magikarp evolves into Gyarados, its brain cells undergo a structural transformation. It is said that this transformation is to blame for this Pokemon's wildly violent nature. Buzzed, everyone crowded around the floating phone as they oohed and awed at the info and Rotom's capabilities. Then someone pointed out something, asking, "Is your Gyarados sick or something?" Gar looked at the person confused, and shaking his head, he replied, no, why? Because the one in this picture is blue, not red like yours, the person asked while pointing to the primary coloration on its body. Gyarados are naturally blue. Buzzed, Garfield's Gyarados is a rare variant called a shiny. Buzzed, they're the same Pokemon but in a different color. Buzzed, Rotom explained. Whoa, that's super wicked, dude. One person exclaimed. So manly. Another agreed. That's good, right? One person asked. How do you get it? Izuku asked Gar. Gar rubbed the back of his head and replied, haha. That's a story for another day. Before anyone could comment more or ask for another story, one of the Pokeballs on Gar's belt began to shake. Gar saw this, and, sweating, he said in a loud voice, "Oh." Everyone saw what Gar meant and immediately scurried away from him, thinking that Gyarados would pop out and nearly crush them all in the small classroom with its huge body. The Pokeball opened up, and a flash of blue light poured out and manifested a much smaller shape small enough to fit on Gar's desk. The matter took form and into an unusual creature, no bigger than a plushie. The creature looked far more like a toy than an animal as its body seemed to be made of old, worn, washed-out cloth. Its head was big and lumpy and swung around like a puppet on a string. It had two long bent ears that were colored black at the tips, and its face was painted with two black eyes, two red cheeks, and a squiggly smile. All the drawn-on parts were extremely sloppy. It had a tail made of wood shaped like a lightning bolt. Upon closer inspection, it appeared that it wasn't a toy but a creature wearing a disguise, as its actual body just peeked out from under the sheet. It even had two very small black dotted eyes right under the false head where the chest would be. "Mimikyu," cried the odd creature. Gar smiled joyfully at the creature and stated happily, "Oh, Mimikyu, what are you doing out of your ball?" "Who's that Pokemon?" one person asked in a creeped-out tone. "UCK. It's super creepy looking," one person garaged in a disgusted tone. "It is kinda scary," one person stated fearfully. "Why is it wearing a puppet?" one person asked cautiously. "What's wrong with it?" another asked with a mix of fear and disgust in their tone. Gar then made a shocked expression and scooped the small creature into his arms. While jumping out of his seat, he exclaimed, "Haven't you Scraggy ever heard of the saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything?" Everyone looked at Gar with a confused expression until Kaminari voiced his 2 cents and said, "What's the big deal, dude? I mean, they're not wrong. It is kinda creepy and ugly looking. It's just an observation." Gar turned to Kaminari with red hate in his eyes. In one hand, he snuggled Mimikyu into his body, and with the other, he punched Kaminari straight in the jaw. Everyone gasped at this as Kaminari hit the floor, only to pop back up and complain in a shout, "Oh, dude, what the heck?" Gar, who still kept his furious expression, held out Mimikyu and shouted back in demand, "I demand that all you Mudbray apologize to precious Mimi at once." Everyone was immediately taken aback by Gar's attitude shift. For him to go from a serious yet kinda dorkable guy to violent and demanding was something to behold. Until Gyro piped up with her apathetic tone and stated, "Why? It's not exactly the prettiest thing to look at. We have plenty of animals in our world that aren't nice to look at. What's the difference with one Pokemon that wears a creepy, ugly rag?" Gar turned towards Gyro with the same furious expression and punched her square in the jaw. Yet again, everyone gasped at this as Gyro hit the floor, only to pop back up and complain in a shout, "Oh." Gar turned away from the class and exclaimed, "Can all of you be any more heartless?" The room then went silent as they heard a very small weeping noise. Everyone looked for the source and saw Mimikyu burying its real face into Gar's shirt as it started to go moist with tears. Gar whipped his head to the class with a hateful glare, causing everyone to freeze or back away. "Now look what you Mudbrays did. Mimi is crying." "It's okay, Mimikyu, don't listen to those stupid Nidoqueens. I'll always think you're the greatest." Gar held Mimikyu into its shoulder like a child and rubbed its back, cooing softly to it. "None of you could ever understand how hard it is to be Mimikyu." Silence filled the room from the dramatics until Katsuki, who couldn't care less about all this, piped up and asked, "Okay, I'll bite. Why are you getting so defensive over it?" Gar looked to Rotom, who gave Gar a silent nod. Rotom floated to the class and pulled up a picture of Mimikyu while reading its data. Mimikyu, the disguised Pokemon, a fairy and ghost type. Dex number 778. It hides its hideous body underneath a rag made to look like Pikachu in order to gain love and affection from others. If the neck on its disguise is broken, it'll stand in front of a mirror all day trying to fix it, but it's extremely difficult, so it'll be crying on the inside. If any harm comes to its rag, it'll spend tireless hours of the night trying to fix it. No one said a peep at hearing its info, as there was nothing to say or could be said. Until one person popped up in a saddened tone and said, "That's really sad." "Shit," one person said while covering their mouth in shock. Gar nodded with an angry huff and exclaimed, "Yeah, well maybe now you heartless jellicents will learn not to judge by appearance alone, and apologize to Mimikyu," he demanded of the class while holding out Mimikyu towards them. Upon seeing the class staring at him, Mimikyu squeaked in fear and wiggled out of Gar's grasp, jumped onto his arm, ran the length of it, and jumped into his body while burying his true face into his neck like a frightened child. However, this reaction only made Gar glare even harder. No one attempted to make a move or say anything with the combined force of Gar's furious glare and Mimikyu crying like a hysterical child. Uraraka, surprisingly, was the first to approach and say to the little creature, "We're sorry for judging you so harshly, Mimikyu." Mimikyu stopped crying and looked up from Gar's neck with a tear-stained face. "Yeah, it's not your fault you're so ugly that you have to dress in the dark not to scare yourself," Zero added in, only to get a sharp jab in the ribs by Momo. "Oh, what he means is, we should have gotten to know why you do what you do before coming up with a conclusion." Momo corrected Zero's explanation. "Can you ever forgive us?" Shoji asked. Uraraka spread out both her hands as if waiting for Mimikyu's decision. Also, she had no idea how to ask for confirmation from it. Mimikyu switched position from Gar's neck to his shoulder as he looked at the girl's hands. Mimikyu looked up and down at the hands, then arched itself back and kept into the air. Mimikyu then landed on Uraraka's chest, sprouted two thin, black arms with 3 fingers, and wrapped them around her face where the small animal began to snuggle her. Gar's expression immediately turned back to normal at this sight, and with a small chuckle, he said, "You're lucky Mimikyu is very forgiving. You know, now that I've gotten to know what Mimikyu is all about, he's actually kinda cute," Uraraka stated while hugging the small creature. "Yeah, creepy cute," Mina cheered. "Like a dark chocolate truffle," Toru added. Gar giggled at the sight of all the girls and some of the guys surrounding Mimikyu and showering him in affection while saying, "Careful guys, Mimikyu really likes attention and might smother you back if he gets too excited." Mimikyu looked so much happier as he waved his little arms around and bounced in place, and his fairy typing makes him even cuter. "Ribbit," Tsuyu said with a slight croak. "How is that even a fairy doesn't even look like a fairy?" Sato asked. "I believe it fits Mimikyu perfectly," Takoyagami answered, causing everyone to look at the bird-headed teen for an explanation. The Fae of ancient stories tell of powerful, mysterious, and twisted creatures that masquerade in the guise of beautiful, otherworldly helpers of the forest, when in fact, they wore a mask that concealed the darkness underneath each Fae, he said like a gothic poet, making everyone's sweat drop awkwardly. Despite his wording, he's not entirely wrong about fairies. Gar added in. "What?" the whole class exclaimed. "Well, fairy-type Pokemon are known for being not only pretty and cute-looking but also extremely dangerous or malicious. They're the bane of dragon-type Pokemon for a reason." Gar explained further. "Well, I don't care. I think Mimikyu could do no wrong." "Can you?" "No, you wouldn't." "No, you wouldn't." Nina picked up the Pokemon and made a baby voice. "Come on, Bakugou-kun, it's your turn to hold Mimikyu," Uraraka stated as Mina's eyes glittered while pushing the Pokemon towards the angry ash blonde who sat in the corner and tried to ignore everyone else. "Fuck no, get it away from me," Bakugou yelled while trying to keep the Pokemon away from him. "Come on, bro, you know you wanna." Kirishima tried to invite him. "Get lost, shitty hair," he shouted at the red-haired teen. "Come on, Bakugou-kun, hold the baby," Mina encouraged him. "What's wrong with you idiots?" he shouted at all of them. "Come on, burp the baby," Toru chirped in with a giggle, all while Mimikyu tried to reach its surprisingly long arms towards Bakugou, like a child looking to be held while letting out a small cute burp. Mineta looked skeptically at Mimikyu, who stared back and said, "If what Takoyagami said is true, then what's Mimikyu's big dirty secret behind its mask? It's a little too ugly for others to look at it." "Boo-hoo," he mocked while picking the small Pokemon from Mina's hands while saying, "Why don't we have a look for ourselves?" Just as Mineta was about to look under Mimikyu's rag, Rotom let off a loud, ear-piercing warning siren that caused Mineta to stop momentarily, while Gar came out to the side of him, punched him square in the jaw, and ripped Mimikyu from his grasp. Mineta flew quite easily from the punch, and after hitting the floor, he shot up, expecting to see Gar's furious face and wonder what he did to deserve it, only to see something much different. Gar did not look furious at him, in fact, he looked terrified. He was pale, eyes wide, body shaking, sweating bullets, and breathing heavily. "Don't do that. Ever." He pointed his finger at him in a dead serious tone. "What the? Why? Why did you just punch me?" Minter retaliated in anger once he broke out of the shock. Suddenly Rotom came next to Minter with Mimikyu's info pulled up and said, "If anything tries to look under Mimikyu's disguise, it'll lash out violently." It is said that once a scholar looked under Mimikyu's rag and saw the horror underneath. That very night he died a slow, painful death. Buzzed. Minter waved it off aloud and said, "Oh come on. You don't really believe that, do you?" he asked in the last part, a bit worried. Gyro twirled her ear jacks and offered, "I don't know, from what we saw Gyarados do alone, who's to say Mimikyu's true form can also kill you from looking at it?" With all this drama going on, especially since he was roped into it from time to time, Bakugou was royally pissed off and voiced his aggravation. "Why do you shitty extras even care about some stupid animal anyway? Why care about any of them? They're just like our animals, just with quirks. There's nothing fucking special about them or any bitch who owns them." He spat. Gar gave a smug look over to Bakugou and shot back with an even smugger tone. "Is that jealousy I smell wafting from your words?" Bakugou whipped his head towards him with a tick already showing on his head and shouted back, "Like hell I'm jealous of you, purple fucker. I don't care about your opus shit-eating animals or how you make them your bitches." Gar smiled vexingly at his answer and offered, "Okay, I see where this is going. I know people like you. After you've tasted an unsatisfactory defeat, you want to test your mettle again to see if you can topple or stand on even ground, right? So let's have it your way in battle." Bakugou smiled wickedly and punched a small explosion. He exclaimed excitedly, "So you finally want to have a proper punch-out, eh? Well, that sounds fucking dandy to me. I'll beat you anytime anywhere with." Before he could finish, Gar slapped his hand over his mouth as he butted in, saying, "Perhaps I should be more specific. I meant that the two of us have a Pokemon battle and..." Bakugou ripped his hand off and cut in, saying, "I'll fight any of your stupid animals." Gar covered his mouth with his other hand, getting a bit more annoyed, and clarifying, No, I meant we are going to battle with Pokemon. To the death," Bakugou shouted while ripping off his other hand, with fire in his eyes. "Enough," Gar shouted into his face, causing everyone to go silent. Gar calmed down while pushing back his hair and continued saying, "Okay, look, in my world, most disputes are settled with Pokemon battles. Trainers never get physical with each other. Come to think of it, no one really does. And there is no to the death magic crap." "Got it." Bakugou nodded his head, surprisingly, in silence. "We'll do a simple 1v1 battle. We'll each have one Pokemon, and whoever defeats the other wins." "Sounds good." This time Bakugou got back his voice as he declared boastfully, "Hell yeah. I'll beat you at your own shitty animal fighting game." Gar smiled, and taking the 6 different Pokeballs from his belt, he placed them on a desk, along with Mimikyu, who stood behind his Pokeball. Spreading his hands around the devices, he explained, "Okay, the 6 Pokeballs before you hold the 6 Pokemon I currently have with me in this world. You are allowed to choose anyone you like, however." Before he could continue, even though his words were being listened to by his opponent, Bakugou snagged a Pokeball and declared, "I want this one. It looks fucking powerful." The Pokeball Bakugou held was slightly different from the normal Pokeball. It was still round with a black divided line and activation button, but the top half was black with 2 yellow lines. Gar blinked at his quick decision and stated, "You don't even know which one that is. I still haven't even told you about them and which typing." "I don't care, let's fight, bitch." Bakugou cut him off impatiently. Gar raised a skeptical eyebrow and asked, "Are you sure you want that one? Cause I still have to explain. Less talk and more beating to death." Bakugou barked at him. Gar shrugged with a sigh, and taking his own, he said, "Okay, then I'm gonna choose this one if that alright with." Gar said while taking a normal-looking Pokeball. Bakugou was already at his limit with waiting and snapped at the older teen, "Enough wasting time. And let's get to the part where I whip you. I'll beat any animal you have with this one, and this one alone." Gar shrugged, and standing up, he said aloud, "Alrighty then." Bakugou was about to throw the ball when Gar quickly grabbed his arm and exclaimed, Whoa. What do you think you're doing?" Bakugou looked at him weirdly and replied, "I'm gonna fight you with a monster, duh." Gar shook his finger like a disapproving mother and stated, No. We are battling outside. You have no idea how destructive they can be, especially in closed spaces. And they're called Pokemon, not monsters. But we can't go outside. Mr. Aizawa will be back soon, and school has already started. We'll get in huge trouble." Izuku stressed to them, knowing full well what he was referring to. Gar petted Izuku's head like a stressed animal and replied, "Relax, Izuku. We won't get in trouble. We're just, taking an intellectual break. You guys don't have to come. Me and Katsuki will duke it out and be back before you know it. And if we get caught, then the blame can be placed on me. You can just say that I instigated it and used my malamar to mind control you. They can't kick me out, Suuya. Are you coming, purple fucker, or what?" Bakugou asked in a raised voice, as he was already at the front door, ready to leave with Pokeball in hand. "That's not my name, Katsuki, and yes," Gar answered while following him out the door, as Mimikyu jumped on his shoulder and Rotom followed up behind while floating. Soon as the two teens left, everyone else followed them out and into a much more spacious area for them to have a proper Pokemon battle. Boy, was this going to be something else. Later in Gym Beta, after a few minutes of sneaking around the school and doing their best to avoid being seen by other classes or teachers, the entirety of Class 1 class finally made it to the Gym Beta. "This is a horrible idea. We should just get back to class before Aizawa-sensei knows we're gone. Can't we just do this after school hours?" Ida stressed to the group as they entered the gym. The class ignored the uptight teen as they all meandered around finding seats at the bleachers, while Gar admired the whole gym, walking around aimlessly, head turned upwards, never looking at the same spot for more than a second, like a kid in a candy store. "Man, this place is perfect for a Pokemon battle, especially for our types," he proudly stated while admiring the tall ceilings and wide open floor plan. "You're not even listening to me," Ida shouted at them with his robotic arm movements. "Shut it, 4 eyes," Bakugou yelled at him while taking one side of the gym. Yeah, what Katsuki said, in the context rather than the form. "Just remember, if things go south, then throw me under the bus. Besides, this'll be quick," Gar stated with hidden smugness in his voice while taking the other side. "Yeah, quick for you, purple fucker," Bakugou shot back boastfully. Gar's sweat dripped and replied in a monotone, "I'm gonna drill some respect into that thick head of yours, even if I have to use a Beheeyum." Gar then turned to Rotom, motioned to him, and said, "Rotom here will be our referee and HP counter of the Pokemon." Rotom flew in excitedly, exclaiming, "Buzzed. I'll do my utmost best, Garfield." "Buzzed. Trainers, send out your Pokemon." Bakugou was quicker than Gar and threw his Pokeball onto the field first. The golf ball-sized device flew from his fingertips and promptly fell on the ground, not releasing the Pokemon inside. Bakugou stared at the ball in confusion as he exclaimed, "It didn't come out. Oi, purple fucker, are you trying to cheat me? There's no murderous magic animal in here." Gar pinched the bridge of his nose and stated back, "That's because you threw it wrong. You have to push the button in the center, and then you throw it." Bakugou went onto the field to retrieve the ball, pressed the button in the center, and nearly dropped it as it expanded to nearly twice its size. Now the Pokeball was the size of a large apple. Bakugou looked at the ball and then threw it out onto the field. The ball popped open, and out came a bright blue light that manifested into a very unusual looking creature. To give the short version, it looked like if you took a Diplodocus, a stealth bomber, and fused the two together, then gave it a creepy ghostly aura that made your skin rise. For the long version, it was very reptilian looking, and as stated before looks like a giant Diplodocus. It was much larger than a human. Its body, although short, was colored dark navy blue that fades into a much light cyan blue on its lower body. Its stomach was pale yellow with 3 red triangles pointing up towards its head with red colored fingers. Its tail is what gave it its length and was the same color as its lower body, while the very tip seemed to fade out to near transparency. Its head, shaped like a stealth bomber, was triangular, colored dark navy blue that looked black with 4 triangular horns on each side of its head, with the ones closest to its yellow eyes being slightly bigger, red eyelids and pale yellow jaw, the front part of the triangles and tip of its triangular head. Inside of the openings closer to its head were 2 mini baby versions of itself. It also seemed to defy gravity as it sat in the air, floating like it had its own sense of gravity. "Who's that Pokemon?" someone asked. Rotom clicked and beeped while pulling up a pic of the Pokemon and read the data aloud. Dragapult, the stealth Pokemon. Dex number 887. A dragon and ghost type, and the evolved form of Dracloak. When it isn't battling, it keeps Dreepy in the holes on its horns. Once a fight starts, it launches the Dreepy like supersonic missiles. "Buzzed, so cool," one person exclaimed. "So metal," another shouted. "A dragon, so lucky," another groaned in jealousy. "It shoots its babies. That's sick," one person commented with a nauseous tone. Rotom heard the last one and added upon it. saying, apparently, the dreepy inside Dragapult's horns eagerly look forward to being launched out at Mach speeds. Buzzed. Oh, then it's fine, I guess, the same person said in confusion. Meanwhile, Bakugou had a shit-eating grin on his face seeing that his gut wasn't just right, but he chose one powerful-looking monster. He did not doubt in his mind that he would win so hard that the purple fucker would be crying on the ground in defeat. Gar smiled and said, my turn, go Tojkis. Gar threw the standard ball from his hands and out popped a new creature that floated around in the air like Dragapult. It was larger than Gar, large enough for him to ride even, shaped like an egg. In fact, it looked like an egg, with 2 wings that had simple swirls in them, black beady eyes with a kind smile, 3 horns protruding from its head with the one on the right colored red, and the one on the left colored blue, and the center one was white along with the rest of the body. It had a 3-parted tail, each getting smaller, stubby legs with 2 toes, and its belly had several blue and red triangle markings. Now, who's that Pokemon? The same person asked. Rotom, again, pulled up a pic of the Pokemon and read its entry aloud. Tojkis, the Jubilee Pokemon. Dex number 468. A fairy and flying type, and the evolved form of Togetic. It is said that Tojkis never appears where there is conflict, so in recent times it is rarely seen by humans. It's also been known to spread gifts and blessings to those who are away from strife, and as such, has been seen as a symbol of peace, prosperity, and good luck since ancient times. Buzzed. It's so pretty. A girl cooed. So cute. Another girl squealed. Its entry is so sad. One person observed with a sad tone. Seeing everyone's excitement hit its peak, Gar turned to Rotom and said, Rotom, start us off. Rotom switched to battle mode and pulled up 2 side-by-side pics of Gar and Bakugou with one Pokeball under their faces, with pics of their Pokemon and their health bars, as he stated like an announcer. With pleasure. Buzzed. Challenger Katsuki Bakugou versus the reigning champ Garfield. The battle will end once either Pokemon on either side has been defeated. Buzzed. Ready. Begin. Gar pointed to Bakugou with a flamboyant pose, similar to Aoyama, and offered, Katsuki, since you are the challenger, I'll allow you to attack first. Bakugou smiled wickedly and shouted back, that was your first mistake. Alright, dragon, attack. But instead of going after Tojkis, Dragapult just stood there and looked back at Bakugou with a confused expression. Bakugou saw Dragapult's lack of movement and yelled, the hell are you doing? I said attack. Still Dragapult did nothing and sweat dropped at him. Even the Dreepy looked confused and scared, even hiding further in its parents' horns. Do it, you stupid lizard. Kill that flying egg thing. He yelled while stomping the ground with his foot. You have to give him commands, Gar shouted to him across the area. Bakugou growled in anger and shouted back, pissed off, I am giving him commands. But the shitty lizard won't do anything. Gar pulled at his hair with one hand and shouted back, you have to tell him a move. You say Dragapult use and then the move's name. Bakugou looks at him strangely and asks back, then what the hell does it know? That's what I was trying to never mind. Rotom, if you'd please. Gar asks Rotom while facepalming in aggravation and exacerbation. Rotom went off battle mode and flew over to Bakugou, where he pulled up Dragapult's current move list. Bakugou stares at the list with an angry, dumbfounded expression as he states, the fuck is use of Dragon Dance. Dragapult then starts to shake its body around like it was dancing. While doing so, a red aura pooled around the Pokemon's body. Bakugou looked at this with an unsatisfied expression and yelled, nothing happened. What gives? Actually, something did happen. Buzzed. Dragapult's attack and speed stats rose dramatically. Rotom answered. Bakugou looked back at Rotom, where it had its stats with its moves, and saw that its attack and speed did rise. Bakugou smiled and exclaimed, keep using Dragon Dance, you fucking lizard. Yet again, Dragapult shook its body, and the same red aura surrounded it, causing its stats to rise even higher. Bakugou smiled even wider at this and continued commanding the Pokemon to use the same move over and over again. Gar was getting thoroughly impatient at seeing Bakugou not even attempting to attack like he thought he would. He didn't like it even more that everyone watching had lost their excitement, not having to watch Bakugou tell a dragon to dance ballet. He pushed his hair back and stated impatiently, anytime Katsuki. Bakugou snapped at him and commanded Dragapult, keep your shit inside your ass, purple fucker. Dragon Dance again. This time when Dragapult danced, no red aura filled its body. Bakugou saw this and shouted, hey, nothing happened. That's because Dragapult's attack and speed stats are maxed out. Buzzed. Rotom explained. Sometime this century would be nice. Gar vexed him implicitly. Bakugou clicked his tongue and exclaimed, alright, now use ... He looked one last time at the move list before shouting, use flamethrower. Dragapult then opened its mouth and shot out a huge column of flames like a fire-breathing dragon, directly at Togekiss. Gar gave a side smile and commanded Togekiss, dodge. Togekiss obeyed, and with quick precision, the egg-shaped Pokemon dodged the attack before it could reach by taking off into the air. Bakugou growled in frustration at this and yelled at Dragapult, "You're supposed to hit that thing, damn it. Go after it and burn it to a crisp with flamethrower." Dragapult flew closer to Togekiss while trying to blast a flamethrower closer to its body. But Gar reacted quickly and shouted, "Togekiss, keep dodging." Togekiss dodged the fiery breath with ease in one swift movement, almost as if it were nothing but a fun challenge. Bakugou growled angrily and shouted, "Why aren't you roasting it? Come on, stupid lizard, you're supposed to be a fucking dragon. Live up to it." The two Pokemon then took off into their air with Bakugou commanding Dragapult to keep using Flamethrower, while Gar kept telling Togekiss to dodge every attack, which it did with extreme grace. It didn't even look like it was trying to outpace the attack, more like it was doing an aerial dance or just playing, spinning around, making sharp turns, or just looking like it was having a grand time. This game of cat and mouse continued on for some time, as Dragapult still failed to hit Togekiss even once, and Gar was getting rather impatient from this circus show. So he cupped his hands and stated loudly, "You know, Dragapult has other moves. You should try them instead of being a one-move Ponyta." Bakugou only glared at Gar but then got an idea as he commanded Dragapult, "Get above that thing and use Flamethrower." Dragapult obeyed and flew right above Togekiss, who did not notice his disappearance at first. Dragapult opened his mouth as hot embers pooled out. The smell and sound of Dragapult's incoming attack alerted Togekiss, and the Pokemon looked up just in time to see the dragon. Gar then quickly shouted to Togekiss, "Togekiss, use Air Slash to get away." Togekiss turned around, belly up, and flapped its wings quickly. Cutting streams of air were produced from its wings just as Dragapult breathed fire. The two attacks collide and cancel each other out. However, Togekiss's attack sends the bird egg flying towards the ground and out of reach from the explosion. Togekiss flaps its wings and hovers just inches off the ground after just nosediving at top speed. Bakugou smiles a toothy grin and shouts, "Use Shadow Sneak." Dragapult then dives down to the ground at Mach speed and disappears into the shadows like a ghost. Togekiss sees this and becomes visibly anxious as it looks around to spot Dragapult. Gar sees Togekiss's distress and calms it down, saying, "It's okay, Togekiss. Just keep vigilant. Dragapult could pop out of anywhere, then be ready to counter." Togekiss chirps and watches the whole field around it like a hawk, though it doesn't do much for the Pokemon, as Dragapult sulks through the darkness like a shark and then pops out and ramps into Togekiss with a sneak attack of ghostly power. Togekiss cries out and is sent flying across the field. "Togekiss!" Gar yells in distressed worry. Bakugou sees Togekiss cry out in pain and smiles at finally nailing the creature. He takes the opportunity to attack while Gar is distracted and shouts, "Now use Dragon Darts." Dragapult sucks in air through its mouth, and suddenly the two Dreepy are launched from its horns like twin missiles. Gar sees this, just as Togekiss gets up, and says Togekiss. Togekiss looks at its master waiting for the command, sees Gar's reassuring smile and says, "Stand firm and let the attack hit." Togekiss chirps in reply and levitates into the air, while standing perfectly still. The twin Dreepy closes the distance in seconds, and both hit directly into Togekiss, causing a small cloud of dust to form. Bakugou smiles proudly, and in an ego-feeding tone, he shouts, "Ha! Finally got that stupid egg thing. Ready to throw in the towel, purple fucker." Gar gave a small smile as a shadow covered his eyes. That made Bakugou backtrack a bit and made him lose all his self-assuredness and smugness. Gar then looked up. With his now visible face, he said, "Oh please, I haven't even begun to fight. I let you have your fun ... but now it's my turn." Gar turned his attention back to the small dust cloud starting to settle, making Bakugou look in that direction, and his face immediately dropped upon seeing what he did. Togekiss was simply floating in the same spot, without even a scratch on its white body. Bakugou looked at Rotom, who was still keeping HP count, and saw that Togekiss had not taken any damage from the previous attack. Nothing happened. Bakugou mouthed quietly. Gar then pointed his arm at Dragapult and commanded, "Togekiss, get in close and use Thunder Wave." Togekiss chirped in reply and flew towards Dragapult with blinding speed. Dragapult freaked out as Togekiss approached and tried to slap the bird away with its tail. Togekiss dodged it with a spin, getting it closer and then emitting a wave of electricity at the dragon Pokemon. Dragapult cried out in distress and fell to the ground as electricity surged through its body. Bakugou stared entranced in shock for a moment as the dragon crumpled to the ground without taking any damage. He shook himself out of his mist and shouted, "What the crap? "Oi dragon, get up. You're supposed to be invincible, so get off the ground." Dragapult tried to raise itself up on its stubby limbs, but only fell on the ground as electricity arched around it. "Buzzed. Dragapult has been paralyzed and is unable to move." "Buzzed," Rotom announced as a yellow symbol went over Dragapult's HP bar. "Paralyzed? What does that mean?" Uraraka asked. "I think it means what Rotom said, Dragapult's movement is limited." Todoroki answered. Seeing his chance, Gar smiled and commanded his Pokemon, "Send Dragapult into the air with Air Slash." Togekiss flew under Dragapult's body and flapped its wings hard, creating the same blade-cutting air currents as before. Only this time, they sent Dragapult soaring into the air. Togekiss wasn't too far behind as it closed the distance between the airborne dragon and appeared right above it. "Now, Togekiss, finish it off with Dazzling Gleam," Gar shouted with excitement. Togekiss pushed its chest out as its red and blue triangle markings began to glow a bright pink. The sparkling became so intense that the sparkles shot from its marks and pelted the dragon in literal sparkles. Dragapult cried out from the bombardment and fell from the sky, due to the attack pushing him down, and fell to the earth with swirls in its eyes. The HP counter on Rotom immediately dropped down to 0. Dragapult is unable to battle. "The champion Garfield is the victor," Rotom announced. "He won," one person said in a neutral tone. "He won." Several others cheered. "Bakugou lost," another said in a neutral observation. "Lost badly. Lol." Another made fun of the ash blonde. Gar ran up to Togekiss and hugged the giant egg bird. He shouted gleefully, "All right, Togekiss." Togekiss chirped with joyfulness and nuzzled into the older teen, absorbing the cuddles and affection. Gar then pulled away from Togekiss and took out its Pokeball. He said, "Good job, now heal up with Roost and return." Togekiss chirped in compliance, landed on the ground, and a ring of feathers spun around it, cleaning up its wounds. Once Togekiss was healed, a beam of light shot out from the Pokeball, and Togekiss's matter was converted and stored into energy. Meanwhile, at the other end of the field, Bakugou was on his hands and knees looking at the ground with an expression crossed between shock, panic, disbelief, and fear. He looked only moments from having a breakdown as he stuttered to himself in a low tone. "I what? BB but I." He dribbled on as Gar walked up to him. "And I'll be taking that back, thank you very much," Gar said to Bakugou while taking the Ultra Ball from his hands and pointing it at the fainted Pokemon. He said, "All right, Dragapult, return." Dragapult then returned to the ball and disappeared. Just as Gar shrunk the Pokeball, Bakugou was coming out of his funk and asked, "How? It's a dragon. It's supposed to be invincible, right?" Gar looked at him strangely and answered, "Dragon types, invincible. TSH, don't make me laugh. Not even Arceus is invincible, and I caught it." He said the last part softly. "No, what you failed to realize are type advantages," he explained. Bakugou looked at him like a lost child and asked, "Type what?" Basically, every Pokemon has a specific type, and each type is strong or weak to something. A little tidbit of info I was trying to explain to you before, until you said you were totally fine with the Pokemon you chose and said, and I quote, "I don't care, let's fight bitch." You also said you'd beat any of my Pokemon with your one end quote. He explained. "Then how did Togekiss win? Aren't dragons supposed to be super strong?" Izuku asked while walking up to the two teens. "They are, but with every great strength comes an equal great weakness. For instance, dragon types are normally weak to other dragons, ice, and fairy, a type that Togekiss just so happens to be," Gar explained with a smug smile. Hearing this made Bakugou lose his current meek attitude and regain his constantly angry one, as he started off in a low tone. "You cheated. You played me, you bastard." He shouted the last part while jumping up and pointing a convincing finger. Gar pushed his finger away with an annoyed expression and shot back, "I didn't cheat. You just rushed into this battle like some beginner noob trainer fighting a Geodude with a Charmander. I tried to tell you about all my Pokemon. What they are, their types, even their moves. I would have even told you about type matchups and let you choose a Pokemon for me. So when you didn't, naturally, I did the smart thing and used the type advantage." Bakugou's face immediately dropped after hearing this. He knew he was smart, but he really messed up with this. He thought it would be easy. Just two animals fighting, and the one hitting harder would win. But he forgot that to hit hard, you have to think hard. I was smart, and you were dumb. Battles are just like fighting. You take the best course of action in order to prevail, even by a slim margin. He finished up while walking away. Bakugou clicked his tongue and mumbled under his breath, "You just got lucky, purple fucker." Gar snapped his head so fast back to Bakugou that an audible crack could be heard from his neck, as he glared daggers at the ash blonde and stormed in front of him, exclaiming in a yell, "Lucky, lucky, it was not luck that let me beat you." Bakugou was taken aback by this. He never saw someone willing get into his face and yell back. Normally, anyone would flee or stay passively silent. Gar continued with his rant exclaiming, "I've traveled around every continent and faced off against every gym leader, collected every badge, challenged every Elite Four member, and faced off against every champion of every region and won. And I've become champion of every region, caught all Pokemon, including legendaries and mythical, and completed every Pokedex. I've IV trained and shiny bred tons of Pokemon. I've mastered every kind of Pokemon food paraphernalia and even completed the 151 recipes in the Currydex. I even still take top spots in all Pokemon coordinator events across several regions. At the mere age of 10, I dismantled an evil team, faced off against the Elite Four, and defeated the champion on my first try. I don't have luck. I have skill," he exclaimed the last part while inching closer to Bakugou's face. Just before any of them could proceed with another action, a very similar and dead-sounding voice asked, "What is going on here?" Aizawa-sensei," one person shouted in surprise. "Care to explain what you're all doing here instead of in class, where you should be?" Aizawa asked rhetorically. We were just One person tried to speak but only came out with a gargle. Kaminari, who was already sweating bullets and panicking, blubbered out, Garfield's Behemoth manners drilled into a Malamar mind raped. Silence filled the whole gym as everyone just stared at the electric teen with weird expressions or sweat dropped at his explanation. Even Mimikyu, who was sitting on Gar's shoulder, his little painted face looked confused and done. "Really?" Aizawa asked blandly. Gar then took a breath and walked up to Aizawa. He explained, "It's my fault, Eraserhead. I convinced everyone to skip class to watch a Pokemon battle between Katsuki and me. He was still sore from yesterday, so I instigated this battle. We just finished, so if you want to punish anyone, punish me." Gar then gave the teacher his biggest, saddest, most soulful yamper eyes he ever made. Aizawa sighed at this and said back, "Since you are new, and with the added point of your predicament, I'll let it slide, but only this once." Gar smiled at his response, which almost faded at Aizawa's follow-up. "However, you all will be subjected to the same exact kind of punishment for leaving class. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the whole class said in unison. Aizawa then rubbed the back of his head in exasperation, and looking around, he stated, "Now, since we're already in gym beta, go and change into your gym uniforms and be back out here to do 50 laps. And we'll keep doing laps until you all truly learn your lesson about skipping and responsibility." "Yes, sir," the class replied in unison. "Also, what is that?" Aizawa motioned to Rotom, floating next to Gar's head. "Oh, that's Rotom," Gar answered. "Hello, Buzzed." Rotom greeted the tired man. Aizawa was silent for a few moments as he looked over the floating machine, whether to make sure what he was seeing was real or trying to figure something out with it. The latter was confirmed, as Aizawa asked, "Can he keep count of things?" I think so," Gar replied while shrugging, and Rotom nodded. "Or whatever you call it. Good. Then he'll be the one to keep track of every lap you all take." Aizawa immediately followed up with an unsettling smile. Rotom made a bunch of displeased electronic noises and replied loudly, "Arceus, damn it." Buzzed. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.